Do 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 do. All right, let's see here. All right, let's see here. Okay, I think I figured out the setup. I have it on my laptop and I'm actually recording from my phone because my phone has like 4K, super fancy, though Facebook destroys all of that. But I can also see your comments on my laptop so that I can properly do things, because like doing it on the phone and trying to look at the comments is horrible. So now we have both. Yay, technology. Look, I even put on makeup for you guys. I haven't left my house in like, I don't know how long. So we're going to talk about some sewing because I'm losing my mind. Hello. Okay. So if you're like me, you're sitting at home, you don't want to go outside because you don't want to contaminate other people or risk getting it yourself or whatever. If you are still working, thank you for doing your job. I'm sure you're an essential worker and we all need groceries and people, healthcare workers and stuff like that to make the world go round. So thank you for doing your job. So I have a couple different camera angles that I'm going to be working from. And so I'm going to be showing you today how to do some seams, how to do a finished neckline, and how to do a finished edge on the end of a tunic. So what we're going to start off with is I have some scrap black linen and some scrap purple linen, because those are what I have hanging around. So I have my scrap fabric. I'm just going to be doing like small samples of each of them so that, I'm not making an actual tunic or anything like that. Basically what I'm doing is going to be just showing you different ways of doing these finished edges and things like that, because I feel like a lot of people focus on the overall construction, but there's multiple different ways that you can do necklines and things like that, and make sure that your seams and how you finish the bottoms of your tunics or the edges of your tunics also create a longevity of your tunic, and so they're really important. So your seams are actually some of the most important things on your tunics. Obviously, it's what holds them together. That's why when I make a tunic, I always have a 1-year seam popping warranty, but I do not have a fabric ripping warranty, because let's be real honest, I can't be liable for the fabric. So I am going to start off with just cutting a little square here, and we're actually going to switch over to another angle of my cameras. So give me just a second here. Ugh. Okay. All right, and now we have this angle. Oh God, please hold, please hold. Okay, great. All right, so now you see I have my scrap fabric here. And so let me grab a pair of scissors. I'm gonna be real honest, guys. I kind of was like, I'm going to do this. And then I prepped in no way for this. So here we are. All right, so I'm just gonna cut a simple rectangle here. And cut this. All right. So let's say that we are making a tunic, and this is my seam edge, right? So there's a couple different ways that you can make a seam. Now, I'm going to show you my favorite way first, and that one is going to be a French seam. So if this is, let's say this is one side of the tunic, this is the other side of the tunic, and we're wanting, or pants or whatever, we're going to want to then combine these two sides together, and you'll see that I have a raw edge right here. And so if you notice with linen, which linen is my favorite, linen is my favorite fabric to work with. I like it. It's breathable, especially if you're fighting in it. I think it's the best thing. So then you'll notice, though, that linen easily frays. If I pull right here, you'll see that, you know, it didn't take very much to pull the fray off. So there's a couple different things you can do with that, and I'm going to show you a French seam first. So we're going to just put my edges together. Now, if this was a whole tunic, what I would be doing is grabbing a couple pins. Oh my God, my pins. Okay. And so I really, with my pins, like to, you know, not too close together, because then you'll be removing pins every like 5 seconds. So to be honest, for this amount of fabric, I'm going to put 2 pins together. You know what? I'm going to move that one down a little bit because that doesn't need to be that close. And I want to make sure that my edges are aligned as much as possible. But that's okay if they're not fully aligned. That's totally fine. You know, happy accidents. Okay, so now I have my fabric pinned together, my 2 raw edges together. So this would be the outside of the tunic, you know, where I have my decorations and everything like that. And I'm sorry, we're doing a French seam. This would be the outside of my tunic where I have all my decorations. So let me just take a, okay, so if I'm doing applique, I don't know what this is saying anymore. So I'm just going to put some, so this would be the outside of the tunic where everything is pretty and I have my applique on it or my painting or whatever. So we are doing the, I guess the wrong side first is the way I would put that. So like I'm saying, if this is the edge of your tunic, okay, and you're combining your 2 tunics together, this is going to be the side that has all your pretties and what's actually going to be facing on the outside of the tunic. This is the front outside of your tunic, okay? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to sew that first. Sew. Okay. All right. I'm done. Y'all can fire me now. All right. So we're going to move this again. We're working on it. I promise. My transitions are rough to say the least. All right, and where's the stupid, no, what, oh God, hang on, technology is cruel, and I don't, okay, there we go. Okay, so now then, let me just boost that up a little bit more here. Okay. Is that a good angle? Yay! Okay, so now we're at the sewing machine. Sorry guys, we're gonna have some technical transitions today, and I'm sorry that my rigging is not better. I'm literally doing this as I go. Okay, so now that we have our machine here, okay, we're going to just feed this through. Now, one thing to notice is that I have my needle, and I know it's a little hard to see from this angle, but I have it all the way to the left, the closest. Now, that's not actually where I want it to be. So I'm going to change that needle position and I'm going to put it in the center. Now, the reason why I'm putting the needle into the center is because I actually want to make a smaller seam here. I want my seam on the inside of my French seam to be smaller than the seam that we're going to put on the outside. And I hope that makes sense to you guys. But if you have questions, I'm not doing anything else. So, you know, just harass me after this video. Okay, so we're going to then, I actually use the side wheel of my machine, and I go ahead and I hold my top thread, and I go ahead and I lower that needle into the machine, well, into the fabric, okay? And then that way, and then I tuck my thread underneath the foot. Oh God, my hand's blocking it a lot. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, and then, so you'll see that I have my fabric aligned with my foot here. Let me see if I can change up this angle a little bit. All right. Does that work a little bit better? Okay, that looks like, so I have it aligned with the bottom of my foot, and then I'm gonna just come here, do. I hope you guys like my transition music too, because everything else is copywritten. Okay, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna do 2 stitches forward, and then I'm going to do 2 stitches back. And so that's my anchoring stitch. Oh God, I went too far. Oh no, oh no, oh no. That's okay. Happy accidents. Do. Oh God, does my sewing machine look dusty on camera? I don't know. And I should have also double checked my thread before I did this. So we're just gonna rethread the top part of the machine. Yay! Look, even professionals can fuck up when it comes to sewing. We're all terrible at this. Don't let anybody lie to you. Alright. So now that I have my top rethreaded, and I suck. All right, there we go. All right, so now I'm just gonna put my fabric back into here, and my 2 stitches forward, my 2 stitches backwards. There we go. All right, and then we're gonna, and I always make sure that I remove my pin right as it gets to the foot, so it is at the foot. I remove that pin. All right, I'm trying to like awkwardly sew this where you guys can see it. All right. Perfect. And again, I'm trying to get this seam as close to the edge as possible. All right, and then again, when I'm at the end here, I'm going to then do 2 back stitches and 2 front stitches. All right, and then there we go. Okay, and then now what you want to double check for is that you want to check along your seam that you have it stitched on both sides, and you want it again as close to the edge as possible. And I also sometimes open up my seam and I pull on it a little bit, and I want to make sure that it is there, it is secure, but that it again is it is as close to the edge as possible. I cannot stress that enough. Now, you see I have these little flyaways because linen is like that. So then I'm going to come in with my scissors here, and I'm just going to trim up these little flyaways as much as possible. Goodbye, flyaways. I hate you. Yay! Flyaways are the worst. Oh. All right, and then so that is all my flyaways trimmed away. Now I have this like gross collection of thread. Also, you'll notice that my desk is incredibly damaged. I have done everything from plasti dip to painting to hammering to anything on this desk. So this desk is very trusty, and I love this crafting desk, even though it's probably going in the trash when I move, which makes me really sad, and I'll just destroy a new desk. But here we are. So, okay. All right, so now we have our first seam, and you're like, oh, but Valkyrie, these are still the raw edges, and that's going to come undone eventually, and then your seam will fall apart. And you're like, oh my gosh, I know, but we're doing a French seam. So that means that now this is all of your pretty stuff, right? Your applique is on this side. This is where the outside of the tunic is and everything like that. What you want to do then is you're actually going to fold this back over, so, or turn your tunic inside out, and then now this is the inside of your tunic. This seam should be on the inside. This should not be outward facing on the tunic. So like I said, again, this is your super pretty side with all your applique, painting, whatever decorations you want to do on the outside of your tunic, and then this is the inside of your tunic. So this is the inside that nobody sees, okay? And now what you want to do is you are going to press this. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to do another transition. Yay! Boo, 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 boo. All right. So we're gonna just come here. And if anybody's wondering what that base is right there, that's my sewing lamp. I literally have my camera attached to my sewing lamp. So, yep, that's a thing. Okay, so we're gonna take this whole thing, oh God, over here. Oh no. Okay, all right, and I hope you can see that. I hope everyone can see that. Okay, so now that we have our fabric sewn on one side, ta-da! You're going to then turn it inside out, like I said, or I'm just folding it over so that you can see it. And then you want to warm up your iron, which I should have done already, but here we are, yay! Okay, and then I'm just trying to see what you guys can see because this is a little bit more difficult than I would like to admit. Okay, so here we are. And my iron is warmed up. And then what I'm wanting to make sure of with this, when you turn it inside out or anything like that, is even if you want to like run your finger along it, you want to make sure that this line is as straight as possible. Like this seam is as pushed out as possible. And so you'll feel the inside of your seam here. And then what you want your finished edge to look like is like this, right? So now that I have it like this, you want to make sure that all of these seams are pressed before you sew them. So some people will say, okay, once you do your initial seam, you're going to flip it inside out and then you're going to pin this again. I don't pin it. Some people do. That's up to you. Oh, I rhymed. Okay, so I'm just going to come right here. You're going to see a little steam because steam pressing is best pressing. Except if you're doing applique. You do not want to do that if you're doing applique. So I'm just going to come right here and I'm just going to make sure I'm going to go over it a couple times. And you definitely want to go over all your seams a couple times with the iron and with steam pressing it, especially if you're using linen, to make sure what you get is a nice crisp seam. So what you'll see now is that's a lot flatter. It's not going to fight me in any way and it's just nice and crisp. And you'll notice right there that that's where my stitching is. And so it's right for the sewing. So now we're going to go back to doing that. Yay. Okay. Transition again. Do, 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 do. Okay. So now we're back at the desk and I'm going to then now sew this again. So I'm going to move my camera over to my stitching camera. Okay. And let's see. Does that work? Okay, so now we're back at the sewing machine. And now, like I told you before, I had my needle in the center. Now I'm going to change that to where my needle is on the outside. So I'm going to change that back down. Now you'll notice that my needle is positioned all the way to the left. And now the reason behind that is because now I'm going to have a larger seam. And so you want your secondary seam to be larger than your initial seam. And the reason behind that is because you're wanting to hide that smaller seam inside of the bigger seam. So we're going to come back through here. I'm going to put it down. I aligned it with my petal. Again, I'm going to hold my top thread as I anchored the top needle into the thread, into the fabric. And then I'm going to come through and again, I'm going to do 2 stitches forward, 2 stitches back, and then I'm going to just sew along the edge. Do 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 do. Sewing, 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 sewing. All right, and then I'm gonna again when I'm at the end of my fabric, I'm gonna sew those stitches again. Do 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 do. All right. Ooh. And that was almost really bad. Ha ha ha. But we didn't fail. Okay, so now we have our oh god, I'm just watching it again like that, like trip over myself. Oh wow, we are okay. That's the angle we're doing. Okay, so now we are at our second seam, and so you will see that you have a stitch here, and then when you open it back up, you don't see the initial stitch that you made. So this is a nice clean stitch. This is where your applique would be, all of your prettiness. This is the outside of your tunic. This is the side of the tunic that everyone will see. And then this is the inside of your tunic. So what you'll see here is that you have this beautiful sealed stitch. So you have this stitch here, and then you have the stitch that's on the inside. And so you don't have any chances of this outside fabric getting attacked or frayed, and then it's definitely going to protect your seams a lot more. Some people will even come through and they will reinforce this section right here with a honeycomb stitch or a zigzag stitch, or at least just double stitch this. It just depends on how harsh you are on your tunics, on your pants, whatever you want to do. I know when I'm sewing wrap pants, or I'm sewing basically any kind of pants, I will definitely put a honeycomb stitch along here, or at least a zigzag stitch along here, and that kind of just locks in that fabric on the inside, so it really reinforces it from coming apart. And then at that point, it would have to be the fabric that rips before this seam will pop. I will tell you that 100 times over. I actually got a steak dinner off of that because my friend Chuck bet me that I couldn't make a pair of wrap pants that would last a year, and let me tell you, it lasted a year, and he still owes me that steak dinner. It's fine, it's fine. Anyways, so that is how you do a French seam, kind of just going back over things. So let's go ahead, and I'm gonna, oh god, oh no, oh no, I'm not very organized. Can everybody tell I'm not organized? Because I'm not organized. Okay. Honestly, what? Okay, so a honeycomb stitch, that's not on everyone's machines, but let me go ahead and pick this up. And then, so a honeycomb stitch is this one right here. So that's a honeycomb stitch, and so that's what people sometimes use. And then some people also use the zigzag stitch. It's really which one you prefer. I know that Lady Armstrong uses the honeycomb stitch, and it is a little bit more interlocking. It is going to be a little bit more sturdy, but again, it does use a lot more thread and a lot more time, so it really depends on what you're wanting to do. And then you know what, actually, let me just come back here, and then I'm gonna do this, and then yay! Okay, all right, I had this somewhere. There we go. All right, so we're back on to wrapping up the French seam. So that's exactly how that works. What you do with your fabric is, and I'm just cutting a secondary piece of fabric to show you again, you're going to stitch along the raw side here, okay? And then after you do that initial stitch, you then flip your fabric. So again, you would stitch on the outside of your fabric. So this is where your applique would be on either side of the tunic. This would be the pretty side. You're going to stitch as close as you can to the edge, and then you would turn your tunic inside out. And so at that point, you would have a seam here. You would flip it, so then you have a beautiful seam here, and then you would then press that seam as such so that you have this here, and then you would make a larger stitch to encompass that smaller seam along here after you've pressed it. And then at that point, you have your smaller seam hidden inside this beautiful seam here. So this would be the outside of your tunic, and then on the inside you would have this beautiful seam here that's encasing the original seam. So that, trying to call me, sorry, you would have no issues with having any fraying or the seam becoming unstable. And again, covering it over again, you can do a zigzag stitch here, or a honeycomb stitch, whatever you would like to do. So that is my favorite seam to do. I really do like the French seam. Now, the French seam is not applicable to everything. There are some things, especially if you're doing like a square in your armpit, that I find the French seam then becomes very bulky. You're doing a lot with the fabric, and it's not fun to have that all. So you can do things like if you make a seam and then you have your raw edge here, you can use what I like to call the alligator scissors. And now the alligator scissors are these. Okay. I can't remember what their actual names are. Pinking shears, maybe. So you'll notice that the teeth of these are actually little mountains, little triangles, whatever you want to call them. And so when you cut along your fabric here, you'll actually cut it and you'll see that it's cutting, it's cutting them into a shape here, and this will actually prevent fraying as well. And then you can actually just come along and stitch here, and that helps. You can also serge your seam and then sew across here. Another option that you have with seams as well is that you can, now I cut that, now I need a new example piece of fabric. This is why I have examples after examples. Yay! Okay. Am I dumb? I don't know. Have I lost my mind because I've been in quarantine for a week? Probably. Okay, so the other thing that you can do is that, again, test fabric. Was black the right choice? You know what? I'm gonna cut a piece of purple here because I feel like now we're showing other things and we're getting confused and everything. Okay, so now I have these two pieces of fabric here. Yay, look at these beautiful pieces of fabric. And what I can actually do with these two, so let's say that these are my seams, is that I can come in and I can actually sew one piece of my fabric a little bit lower than the other one. And I can make this seam, you know what, we're just gonna sew this real quick. Y'all get to stare at my face for a second while I sew this real quick because I can't just show you. All right. Okay. All right. And now, okay. So then I can come in and I can also just, so now I have my seam. I can also just come in and then roll this. So 1, 2, and then now I have a rolled seam. And let me actually transition to my other camera because I feel like that will understand what the hell I just did. Okay, so nope, not the ceiling. Oh, yay, there we go. Okay, great. Woo, figured it out. Okay, so get into the holder. All right, there we go. Okay, so now yeah. Contrast is good. You're totally right. Okay, so obviously this isn't the best seam ever. It's totally at an angle. Here we are. I sewed this like super fast. But so another thing that I can do, and you can actually even sew this a little bit bigger. I kind of just sewed really close, but you can kind of sew it a little bit down here too. And so now that I have this one seam sewn, I can come here and then I can just roll it. And then I can also just sew right along that roll. Now, normally I would want to iron this first so that it stays in place, and then I can go ahead and I can just sew, and you want to sew right along the edge of this fold right here, and then that way you still have a beautiful seam on the outside and a beautiful seam on the inside. Now you can do that either two ways. You can roll it into the seam so then you're just kind of holding itself, or you can do a seam where you open up the fabric and then you roll it and then you seam it down on one side here, and then you just sew along this. Now it is going to give you an extra stitch on the outside, and oh, that's my hair. And so you would get an extra stitch here, but that's up to you which one you'd rather do. So you can either roll the seam into itself, and I made a awfully small seam to show this, but you can either roll the seam into itself and then sew along this, and then you would just have this little rolled seam on the inside, or like I said, you can open up your fabric and then you can roll the seam onto the next fabric right here, and then you can sew along here, and then you would just get a stitch here and here. Now the thing is that if you want to do a stitch that's also going to show up on the outside of your fabric, you want that stitch to be as straight as possible. So you want to make sure that your seam is straight, and then you want to make sure that the stitch on the inside is straight. And now if you're going to do a seam like that, you want to make sure that your fabric is good here, and you want to make sure that it all has the same even fold on the inside, and that it has an even line on here, because that seam is going to show not only on the inside but on the outside. Now that seam can actually look really cool if you use like a contrasting thread or things like that. You can actually use seams to accent the actual garment. So totally up to you. I realize I'm talking with my hands. Does this kind of like camera angle just make you do that? Because like I feel like it does. Oh God. Okay. Anyways, so ta-da! Okay, so we have talked about seams. Does anyone have any questions about seams, whether it is this kind of seam where we do a roll, or we do a open up, roll, and sew, or the French seam? Before I go on, which what I said is you would sew your seam on the inside here as close to the edge as possible. You would flip it, and then you would iron this down, and then you would sew a larger seam on the outside, and then that larger seam would show up on the inside of your tunic like this, which would have the enclosed fabric, and then the outside of your tunic would be all beautiful like this. Yay! Okay, anybody have any questions? No, not seeing any questions. All right, super, no questions, yay. Okay, so now we're going to talk about, I'm actually about to get to that. Perfect. Okay, so now we're going to talk about finished edges or hemming, or well, I guess not hemming. I'm not covering hemming pants today. I'm doing finished edges, seams, and necklines. So let's do a finished edge. All right, so let's get some more test fabric. Woo! Okay, so if this is the end of my fabric here, my favorite way of finishing, oh God, okay, whatever. Is actually to do another piece of fabric and either applique that down, or to fold it on the inside and then do a straight line, or you can do it without the heat and bond, whichever way you want to do that. So here we go. All right, so I have the edge of my fabric here. Now you can always simply just do a tuck and then another tuck, and then sew along the edges. That's obviously always an option. Sometimes you do have an issue though when you come along a curve, because then obviously this tucking is going to then askew. So then you can like do a pleated tuck, and that allows you to curve, but then sometimes that'll look really weird along the edges here. So when I'm finishing the bottom of a tunic, I'm gonna see if I can get this a little bit straighter for you, because that looks a little bit on the garbage side. All right, yeah, it's a little bit better. All right. Okay. So if this is the end of a sleeve or the end of a tunic or anything like that, there's a couple different ways you can do this. So and I'm going to show you how to do this on both a straight edge and on a curved edge as well. So I would, this is so small. I just don't want to measure it. That seems kind of ridiculous, but I feel like that's necessary. Hold on. Okay, so if I'm doing the whole bottom of a tunic, I would measure the bottom of my tunic. So we're pretending that this is a whole bottom of a tunic. Whole bottom, okay? So then what I would do is I would measure the bottom of my tunic. I'm going to just scoot this a little bit more forward here because y'all don't need to see what's not on the table. Yep. Okay. Yep. Okay, great. All right. So then I would measure the bottom of my tunic. So this is about, I don't know, what is that? 4.5 inches. Okay, so that's 4.5 inches. Okay, so now I have the measurement of the bottom of my tunic, bottom of my sleeve, whatever this is, one edge of my tunic, okay? And then what I would do is I would come over to my purple fabric here. Yay, purple fabric. And then I would measure the same thing. And now this is where it comes different, right? Because there's a couple different ways that you can do this. So the first way is that I can just measure this here and I can mark it and cut it. I'm being lazy, so I'm just going to cut it at 4.5. And actually, I usually give myself a little bit more on the fabric that I'm going to hem with and the fabric that that is my tunic. And the reason behind that is so that if for any reason I mismeasured or anything like that, I have excess fabric to work with. Now, since I measured the, look at me, I totally marked the edge of it and I totally cut it right there. Okay, so now since I did this, of course, this isn't going to be the same size as my tunic, right? This is only going to be covering the edge of my tunic. So if I only want this to come up, you know, like an inch, then I'm going to measure an inch. Obviously, on the bottom of a tunic or on the bottom of the sleeve, I'm really comfortable with 3 inches minimum. And then you always want to add a 1/2 inch for your turnover, okay? So, I then come here and I'm obviously, we're going to do centimeters instead of inches. So I'm going to do 5 centimeters, and then I'm going to add an extra 2 centimeters for the fold over, whatever, let's do 3 centimeters, whatever. Okay. And then I'm going to mark that. I'm actually going to come across my whole fabric. Now this is relying that the edge of my fabric here is cut perfectly, and you want to make sure that that's the case, that you have one solid, oh my God, I'm botching this because this is a mini version of what I actually do. So now I have it marked, several spots here. Oh my God, this is kind of aligned. Look at me do this. Oh God. All right, nobody judge me. All right, so now, there we go. Okay, so now I have this like little section measured and marked out. My chalk does not work for miniature parts, and I don't know where my pencil is, so we're working with it. Yay! All right, so now I'm going to cut this here, and I'm going to cut along my line here. Perfect. Okay, now, if this is my edge of my sleeve or the bottom of my tunic, whichever one, I have now to sew this along the bottom here. And now, if I want to sew this, okay, depending, do I want this to be on the inside of my tunic or the outside of my tunic? Now, if you want just a flush, straight, one color at the bottom, you don't want, you know, it to have a variance at the bottom or whatever like that, you can do this in the same color, sew it, and then tuck it on the inside, and then sew it again, and then nobody sees that. They just see maybe the stitch mark at the bottom, but that's not really noticeable. If you want it to be a contrasting color and showing, you know, something beautiful, what you want to do is you actually want to start on the inside of the tunic. So this is now, what this would be is that when I flip this seam, okay, this is the inside of my tunic, and it'll be flipping over to the outside of my tunic. So this is where all my applique is, and I'm going to put like a little A here. So applique. So this is all my prettiness on the outside, and then this is the inside of my tunic, little I for the inside of my tunic. Okay, so applique side, inside, applique side, inside. I hope that makes sense. Am I boring when I talk? I have no idea. Whatever. Okay, anyways, so we're going to make a seam right here, and I'm going to go ahead and just do that. So now I have this seam, okay? Again, inside of the tunic, outside of the tunic, inside of the tunic, outside of the tunic. I'm glad we covered that for the millionth time. Now, we're going to then fold this. And so this is now the bottom part of my sleeve, or this is the bottom part of my tunic. And what we would do is we would come along here and we would press. So I'm going to just press this real quick. And again, you want to do a steaming press, right? So you want to make sure that you press and you really steam upon it. Okay. All right. And so once I do that press, now you have a pressed edge here. And so this would be the actual seam of your tunic. So you have this beautiful seam line at the bottom. This is the inside of your tunic, the outside of your tunic. And then you're like, oh my gosh, but now we have this gross raw edge. And you're like, you know what? You're totally right. You don't want to seam that. That's terrible. Nobody wants a raw edge at the outside of their tunic. So then what you simply want to do is you want to come through here and you want to just roll that ever so slightly on the way in. Now, I eyeball mine. Some people measure theirs and then roll it in and they like put little marks the whole way. I certainly eyeball mine, but the dangers of eyeballing the bottom of your tunic or this seam line here is that it's not even. And you'll see it here even, and this is because it's a smaller spot, but you'll see that if you do not have that perfectly figured out, that you're going to have a wonky seam line at the top here, and you certainly don't want that. So once you have this tucked in, whether you're measuring and tucking or you're eyeballing and tucking, whatever you want to do, however confident you feel, and then you'll see that you have this beautiful seam line. Again, what you're going to do is you're going to press that tuck. So press, 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 press. Okay, and now we have this pressed tuck. So again, I have my tucked on the inside and I have my press seamed on the outside. And so again, like I said, normally for a tunic or a sleeve, I'm going to have this about 3 inches to 4 inches tall with a 1/2 inch for my seam line. And then I'm going to sew this inner seam here. So this was sewn like this. This is my applique side, this is the inside of the tunic, applique inside, and then once I have that seam done, I'm going to turn it over, I'm going to press it, and so now I have this beautiful finished seam on the edge of my tunic or on the edge of my sleeve, and then I also am then going to tuck in the fabric, and then I also have a beautiful edge up here, in which then I'm going to align the edge of that fabric to my foot. And you want to stitch as close as possible to the edge of that fold. Stupid. And we're struggle bussing. There we go. And I didn't do that. The risk that falls when you are stitching as close to the edge as possible is then running off the edge like I just did, because I is smart cookie. I think I'm always just nervous when I do Facebook Live things. So this is gonna look like such garbage and I'm a little mortified right now. Okay. Yeah, that looks terrible. So here we are. Oh God. Okay, let me try this one more time. I'm just gonna sew over it because here we are. So, all right, one more time. And your fabric sometimes likes to fight you on it, and that's always fun. Okay. All right, so oh God, it looks so bad. Oh, I feel like I should do the whole thing over again. Oh man, this looks like I'm drunk and stitching, and I promise you, I have not broken into the tequila yet. Oh, geez Louise. Okay, so now we have our seam stitched down. It looks like I have like one fray kind of trying to escape there. So we're going to nip that in the butt. Okay, so now I have it stitched down. You'll notice that this is my first attempt. This is my second attempt. Take it slowly. Be concise. Oh my God. All right, so you'll see now I have my stitching along the edge here, and I want it to be as close to the edge as possible. And just kind of right there, just catching that fabric. And yeah, see, I'm like cherry picking the best part of this because damn, did I mess this up. Oh my God. I promise you, I'm usually way better. Oh, Lord, I don't know if I want video evidence of this. But you have this stitch along the bottom. Now, you can also, because this stitch is a little intimidating, and I understand that it's hard to get it straight. Look at me. I've been doing this for years, and it's, you know, I'm also nervous because live feed is nerve-wracking. It can be hard to get that straight, beautiful stitch. So, another stitch that you can do is you can kind of just go up to your zigzag stitch here, and you can feed your, and you can honestly do this over your straight stitch too if you want to hide that mess of a straight stitch, because let's be honest, it really looks like I'm sewing drunk right now. So you just come in, I'm gonna anchor my thing again, and then I'm just gonna right over. There we go. And now you see that there's like just this little zigzag stitch over the seam here. And so that anchors it. You can definitely do that too. You can actually even do it in a contrasting color if you want to. That adds a little bit of fun, a little bit of interest to it. I'm just going to be annoyed no matter what I do with this edge at this point, because that initial seam just looks like garbage. So, oh God, it looks so bad. Okay. So now you have a finished edge, you have your beautiful inside, and you have this. This is not my favorite way to finish off a piece of fabric. We're going to go to my favorite way to finish off a piece of fabric because, yeah. So that's dead to me, and I'm probably going to burn that later and never remember that awfulness again. So now we're going to cut off another piece of tester fabric. Yay, tester fabric. Okay, so now, okay, we're gonna cut this down a little bit. Okay, oh God. Okay, I'm trying to get this as straight as physically possible. I should have my thing out. Okay, all right, so now this is the edge of my tunic again. And now we're going to bring my favorite thing in, which is Heat and Bond. Now, I use Heat and Bond Light. That is your purple Heat and Bond Light. Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. I actually already did an inseam and covered seams already. Sorry about that. So, I usually go off the finished edge of my Heat and Bond, and that means that I'm already having a straight edge to work off of. So, again, you would measure the bottom of your sleeve, bottom of your tunic, whatever. Oh God, what did I do with my measuring tape? It is also good to hold on to like 50 measuring tapes and 25 pairs of scissors, because God knows that your measuring tape and your scissors will run away from you the first second that they get. They will betray you and they will disappear into the sunset, and you will never know where your scissors or your measuring tape went because they just eloped together and ran off into the sunset. I cannot tell you how many measuring tapes and scissors I've bought because I just gave up on looking for the other ones. It's a nightmare. Anyways. Now we have our finished edge of our tunic. I'm going to measure, or finished edge of my sleeve, works for both, yay. And my scrap heat and bond, sorry it's a little wrinkly. Maybe I can get like a straighter piece of like scrap heat and bond. Let me see what I have in my handy dandy heat and bond scraps here. This one looks a little bit better. Save your scrap heat and bond. There's always uses for it. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. All right. Yay. Okay, so scrap heat and bond. Woo! And the bottom of my tunic. Woo! Okay, so now measure the bottom of my tunic here. And so we're at about 3 inches and 3/4. Yeah, we're gonna do that. So then I'm gonna take this measurement and I'm gonna come onto my heat and bond here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw on my heat and bond. So I'm going to take that initial measurement and I'm going to come here and make that mark. Did I choose a pen that's out of ink? Garbage. All right. Round 2. And make that mark. Yay! That one worked. Woo! And make that mark. All right. And we want to make sure. And this is why I like using the edge of the heat and bond, because it gives me a straight edge to work with, which is super nice. And again, so my edge and my edge. And then honestly, sometimes I'll even like add a little bit extra, and it doesn't hurt to add a little bit extra because you can always cut the extra off. So there's my little bit of extra that I'm adding to the edge here. So now that we're here, again, with this, I would make it 3, and then I would add an extra 1/2 inch. We obviously are working in a scale down, so I'm going to use a 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to add 1, 2, 3. That looks good. Again, you can always eyeball it. How thick do you want the bottom of your tunic, contrasting, whatever, to be? So now I have it here, and you'll notice that's much easier. Of course, if you have cut straight fabric to begin with, it wouldn't have been as wonky as my initial seam. God help us all. Okay, and then again, 1/2, 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then now, let's do this one. 1, 2, no, wait, wrong one. Okay, and then now, why is that? Well, here we are. Okay, so then I'm gonna just come here and I'm gonna connect these. You can also use a ruler. You should probably be using a ruler. Sarah, why aren't you using a ruler? Use a ruler. It's a popsicle stick. Or popsicle sticks for our mini yardstick, because I would be using a yardstick ruler here, and that would be my best bet. But I don't have one of those that is small enough for this. So yay, a fake yardstick ruler. There we go. Popsicle stick. All right, and then I would come down. Okay, and then remember I added this little extra bit, so I will come down on my little extra bit and I will come down here. Okay, and now we have our little sleeve doohickey. Don't use Sharpie, it comes off all over your hand. Clearly terrible, does not apply to heat and bond very well. I made mistakes. Usually I use a pen or a pencil. Pencil's probably better. Now, this is going to be my sleeve edge for this, right? Or you know, tunic edge, whatever you want to do. So I'm actually going to cut this out first. And honestly, you can be a little lazy about it. What I like to do is I like to cut this out first, because then I'm not using as much fabric by just, you know, like gluing a bunch of heat and bond to it that I haven't cut out. So this does not have to be perfect the first time around. So this is now the edge of my tunic, or the edge of my sleeve. Ta-da! So that's how high it's going to be. But you can't just use this, right? This is paper. That's ridiculous. So now we're going to cut out a piece of purple fabric So piece of purple fabric. Piece of purple fabric is a little bit bigger than my sleeve, right? So now I'm going to iron this. Now, with ironing heat and bond to fabric, do not use steam. 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 So, now we're going to come here. All right. And are we good? Are we good? I can't see it. So we're going to hope for the best. Okay. All right. So, okay. And I think you guys are good there. I'm gonna just okay. Perfect. Okay, so now we're gonna heat up the iron again. Yay, heating up the iron. And then you have your piece of heat and bond that you've cut out to the shape of your sleeve, and you have your fabric. All right. Now, you iron your fabric first. No steam, no steam, no steam, no steam. Okay, and then you're going to then iron your heat and bond onto that. So here is my piece of heat and bond, and then I'm going to just make a couple passes here. I never leave the iron onto it, and you don't want to iron too much or too little. I always do a corner check, so if my corners can easily come up like that, then I should probably iron it down just a little bit more. Okay. Okay, my corners aren't easily coming up. Yeah, so I just check my edges. Edges look good. Edges aren't easily coming up. All right, and so now it is perfectly bonded to the fabric. Yay, bonded to the fabric. Woo. Okay, so now we're back here. And we are going to cut that sleeve out. Now we can be precise with our cuts. So we're going to come here, cut, going to come here and cut along our edge. Okay, cut along our edge. Okay. Okay, and then I'm going to cut along the edge here where the bottom of my heat and bond was. And now we have a very long rectangle. Woo, rectangles. Why does that seem a little off? I don't know why that seems a little off. Probably because I'm using scrap heat and bond. Okay. Does that look weirdly wobbly? I don't know. Okay, now I'm just being weird. Okay, so now we have this rectangle of fun. It just seems weird. Why does it seem weird to me? Is it, what is happening? Am I losing my mind? I feel like, oh God, it's been too many days in quarantine. I'm losing it. Okay, that looks a little bit better. Okay, so now we have the bottom of our sleeve or the bottom of our tunic. Yay! So here we go. But of course, how do we apply it to it, right? Because if we want this to be the outside of our tunic, and where did my chalk go? Okay, so this is your applique side or the outside of the tunic, and this is the inside of the tunic, IA. Okay, then we want not the seam to show here, right? Because then you have this ugly seam looking on the outside of your tunic. So we want to make sure that we flip this like this, okay? And then you want to sew this with just a little bit of seam allowance. You don't want to do a lot. So and this is not scaled down. This is the actual size of the seam that I would give it, or else you're creating a lot of bulk inside that bottom seam and that just doesn't look pretty. So there we go. Okay. So now I have this stitch along the bottom here, and then we're going to flip it. This is really weird on a small scale. Okay, so obviously it's gonna fight me for a second. So what we need to do now, and you always wanna make sure that you have your double stitch back and forth here and back and forth here, or your stitches will just fall apart. You can also do a square knot on the edges of whatever stitches you do. And so you tie once, and then you come back through and you tie again for the second time, and then that gives you a nice anchor on your thread, and then from there you can cut your thread. Ta-da! Okay, so you're going to peel away the paper. There we go. And then peel away the bottom side, which comes off way easier once you do the top side. There we go. And then you're going to, now this is where it gets a little tricky. You want to fold your seam and make sure that your seam is right where it needs to be, you know, so you don't want it to fold up and then you have this like weirdness here, right? Because that's not what you want. You want to make sure that you fold on the seam. You want to roll that seam out as much as possible. You want to make sure that that seam is all the way pushed out. So I'll even come in here with my hand and I'll make sure that that seam is all the way pushed out. And then now we have again that beautiful seam at the bottom, and we have a flyaway. Okay. And then what you want to do, now you have your heat and bond here on the bottom side of your fabric. See, shiny, yay, ooh, shiny. And then so you want to come here, make your crease, make sure that the edge of your fabric is as pretty as you want it to be. And then you're going to iron this down. So come in with the iron. Again, no steam, no steam, no steam at all, no steam. Okay. Now you have your finished edge here, and this is all applique, or this is all ironed down with the heat and bond, so you'll notice that's not going to come up because it's like glued down basically. So now what you can do is you can set your machine to an applique stitch. I am not going to show an applique, like how to do an applique stitch. That is for a different tutorial somewhere else. Look it up. We're not having it, not today. All right, and then yeah. And then so now you want to do your applique stitch. Did I not catch my needle? I did not catch my needle. Fun. Okay, so I'm gonna rethread my top. No steam at all. Okay, so then now I got my applique stitch rolling. And so a really fun thing that you can do is you can do a contrasting applique stitch. So you can do like a different color, like with this I would maybe do maybe do like a silver or a white applique stitch. So then you'll see at the bottom here you have your applique stitch, and that's going to just cover the space between so this is the raw edge that you're covering, and then that way you have this right here. This is already glued down, so really what you're doing is you're reinforcing that raw edge so that it doesn't fray up or come off the fabric. So now you have your applique stitch. Why does that look so weird on the camera? It does not look that wonky in person, and I don't understand what's happening, if it's like the angle or what. That is super weird. I am a little weirded out by that. But so then you have your edge of your tunic or your sleeves. And then, so let me go ahead. I'm going to pull out an example. Hold, please. All right. So then... Okay, so then the edge of this tunic, so like this one, which is my Harry Potter tunic, you'll see that just like in our little example here, which I have no idea where I just threw that. Aha, like our little example here where you have your nice seam and then you have your applique stitch, and then that's the bottom of your tunic. That's the same thing I did here for the bottom of my Hufflepuff tunic. So you have your applique seam, you have the finished part of your tunic, and then you'll also see that it's also on the inside here. And so that just kind of gives you this really nice turned edge, and it also gives you a nice contrast at the bottom of your tunics. I think it looks really nice. I really like the applique stitch, and like I said, you could have a lot of fun with this. Like I could do a white one instead of the gold here so that it stood out, and it kind of gives you an extra layer of decorativeness that you can have with the applique stitch along the bottom. And again, I did that on both the edge of the bottom of the tunic here, and I did it on the bottom of my sleeves here. So again, you have your finished edge here, and then you would flip that over, iron it down, and then you have your applique stitch. Now you'll notice that I did gold down here and I did black up here, and black seems to blend in a little bit more. So I didn't want my applique stitch up here to stick out as much, so I made it the same color of the tunic, but down here I used a more shiny gold, and that creates a nice little, hint of contrast to make the tunic a little bit more fun. So this is going to be my favorite style of a finished edge, is going to be, again, taking the Heat and Bond light, that's going to be the purple, and that's going to be taking it, making your seam, flipping it over, and then ironing it back down and doing a stitch along the top. So now we have covered French seam, flat felt seam, rolled seam, finished edges, two different ways. But tunics don't just have a flat edge, right? They also have your gores, which are on a angle, right? This is curved because usually you want your side gores to be a little curved. It's a little bit more flattering. And so you're like, oh my gosh, how do I do a curved bottom when you're saying to, like just measure and cut out these rectangles for the regular sides of the tunic? So that's what we're going to cover next, is finishing a curved edge. So that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to be finishing a curved edge. So let's get to it. So I don't like this scrap piece of fabric. Let's cut a new one. Yay, new scrap pieces of fabric. Are you guys tired? I'm tired. Okay. I might save necklines for a different day. We're going to do necklines on a different day. I did not realize how long seams and a finished edge would be. I will try and do this again tomorrow, and then we can do a neckline because I'm getting kind of tired. So, all right. we're going to do a curved edge. So let's take the purple this time. Yay, purple. All right, so we're making our little gore here, and so we're gonna just cut this out. Yeah, all right. And then it's a gore, right? So it's not like a tunic, so I'm going to fold it over here, and then I'm going to cut my cone, and then I'm actually going to come in and make my bell. So now this is going to be the gore of my tunic. So that is the rounded side panels of a tunic that allows the bell shape of the tunic and fits more comfortable to your body. If you are now learning that this is a magical thing and part of tunics, you want to measure the length of this from where your belt sits to the edge of the tunic. And then I usually make this like, I don't know, like 30 inches, 30 inches across is the best bet here. And so then from this to this, and then you want to just cut out your angle and then round it. And so now that I have my rounded sides of my tunic, you're like, oh my gosh, how do I make the edge of this, right? So just like this, you want to make sure that you are precise in your measuring of this and precise in your stitching of your seam here and folding it over. Why do you ask? Because if this is like an inch bigger than your side, you know, your turnover seam on this, then they're not going to properly match up, right? Because on a tunic, let's just pull that back over here. You still have your seams, and you want your bottoms to perfectly match up, right? So if you have this an inch taller than this, then they're not going to match up perfectly when you do the seam along the edge, right? And then you're sad, and everyone's sad because it's wonky and it looks like garbage. So let's not make garbage tunics. Yay! So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to take my heat and bond first, and let's find a new scrap heat and bond. Oh God, I'm losing my scissors. I'm telling you, your scissors and your flippin' measuring tape are the two things that run from you in life. And you're like, why do you forsake me? I need you. And then it's real sad, and everybody's sad because nobody wants their measuring tape or their scissors to run away from them. That makes you sad, and everybody makes them sad. So what I do first is I actually come onto the heat and bond, and I trace, not with Sharpie, but it looks like the only thing I have is Sharpie. So adventure, you usually want to use a pen or a pencil. Why? Because you don't want to mark up your fabric on accident, and that sounds really sad. So I'm going to sit here and I'm going to trace the bottom of my curve here. So we're tracing, right? So we're coming here, and then there we go. And again, like I said, I always give myself a little extra room with the fabric that's coming onto it. And so there we go. So we have traced the bottom of the fabric, and that's also why I fold and cut, by the way, so that when I do this trace, I know that my sides are identical. So when I flip it, I don't have to worry about, oh God, was this side bigger than this side? Because that sounds like a nightmare. So now that I have the bottom angle of my gore traced, so this is the bottom of my tunic right here, and this is the and this is my gore. I need it to make sure that it aligns with this part of the bottom of my tunic, right? So I've specifically measured this to a certain amount, and I need to specifically make sure that this matches that, right? So we what did we do? Oh God. So I'm going to do my 1/2 inch, and then I did 1, 2, 3. So then I have my 3 here. There we go. And now I'm going to make this a little bit on the smaller side, right? So I'm going to come here to my 3, and I'm going to measure that, and then I'm going to come down here to 1/2 inch and 3. And I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to kind of just work my way around here. 3, 3. I'm just saying 3. You don't really have to say that. I'm just losing my mind a little bit here. Was it? Oh God, see? And now I'm losing my mind more. It is 1, 2, 3 here. 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 Okay, so now I have it measured all the way around, so I can come through and I can just connect the dots. There we go. And now I have that bottom curve that I had on my gore. Yay! So then I can close that off, and I can close that off. Super. So now I have this beautiful shape. And now, like the other one that we did, we're gonna just loosely cut this shape out. So cut, 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 cut. This is why you don't use Sharpie. Cut, 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 cut. Okay, so now we have our shape loosely cut out, and we need to press the heat and bond onto, and since we made our gore in purple, I'm going to be pressing this on black. So now I'm going to press this onto here. Again, do not use steam, do not use steam, do not use steam, do not use steam. Don't use steam. Let's not use steam today. No steam. So now we have our cutout bottom of, so I'm doing this in opposite. My gore is in purple, my edging is in black, unlike the bottom of my tunic that is black, and then this is in purple. So now I have this part cut out, and we're going to press the heat and bond shape onto the black. So we're gonna press, 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 press. And we are waiting for the iron to heat up because my iron is stupid and shuts off every 5 seconds. So, does anybody have any questions so far while we're waiting on that? With like the question about like making a side panel for your tunic to make it more of a bell shape, or the turning of this in, ironing it back down, and making the applique stitch to make a finished edge of your tunic. Does anybody have any questions before I continue? No? Yes? No? Yes? Yes? No? No? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I think the iron is heated up. So, we're gonna press. No steam. Press. All right. And now our heat and bond shape that we sketched onto the heat and bond is ironed down. It's not coming up. Yay, not coming up. And then now we're going to be more precise, and we're going to cut out our shape. So here we go. And cutting it out. Do 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 do. It's really weird working with this on like a super small scale. Like, I feel like I'm making clothing for dolls, and it's so strange because I've only made people-sized tunics. So, like, I don't know what I'm really doing with myself, making tiny-sized clothing, but here we go. Or, like, tiny-size examples or something. So now we have the bottom part of our gore. And you'll see that I have my excess here, and that's totally fine. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, again, if this is my applique side, and my inside of my tunic. So inside of my tunic, applique side of my tunic, inside, applique. Good. Glad we covered that. I'm going to then match these up on the inside of my tunic so that this is my seam. And you'll see if you did, you know, trace it properly and everything like that, that it does match up. So now I have this matched right here. And I'm going to put this together. Now you can either pin this or you can clip it. I do neither because I've been just doing this for so long. But, you know, cutting corners is bad. It's bad, kids. Go to school. Don't cut corners. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Okay. You know what I miss? I miss, like, going out to restaurants and, like, getting food that somebody else cooked for me because I'm real tired of cooking, guys. I'm going to be real honest here. That is my least favorite thing about being quarantined is cooking my own food. And, like, I know that we can do takeout and you should definitely support your restaurants with takeout and stuff like that. But, you know, most of the time you end up at home and you're like, well, I'm already home. I should probably cook something. And then that's terrible. Okay, so I am stitching along the curve. Again, I'm going to be stitching with just a minimum little seam line here. And this seam line is actually true to the actual size of the tunic too. I don't do a super huge seam line along the bottom of my tunics because that makes them super bulky. What? Okay. All right. My video was interrupted. Okay, something happened with the internet and I don't know what happened, but we're back. It looks like we're back. Everybody think we're back? I think we're back. Okay, great. All right, so I don't know what happened. That was terrible. Okay, now, once we have this established, again, so at this point, I don't cut off my excess until I have flipped the fabric. So do not cut off the excess until you have flipped your fabric. I cannot stress that enough. So I'm going to, again, peel off my extra paper here. And now all of the paper has been peeled off and we can flip the fabric. Now this is going to be a little bit more like a pocket. You see that curve right there? It's going to be a little bit more like a pocket because you're working on a curved edge, right? And so you can fold that down. There we go. And sometimes now, and this is one of the reasons why I like to do a smaller seam is because you're not fighting with a lot of fabric on the inside. But if you do find yourself fighting with the fabric a little bit on this inside, what you can do is you can actually just do a little bit of a relief stitch on either side of the curve. So little snips, little snips. So I put one on either side of the curve and then one in the center here. And that actually just allows the fabric to turn inside out a little bit easier. Fun fact, you can also do that for corners or basically anytime that you're working on a rounded edge because that inside fabric is going to fight that natural curve that you're trying to do. So now I have my fabric flipped and now we have this beautiful bottom edge here. So we have the bottom edge of the tunic and then we have the bottom edge here. And now you can align this and you can cut off your excess and align this and cut off your excess. Perfect. Yay, and now you just have this. Now, again, you're going to press the bottom of this down, just like you pressed the bottom of your tunic down to make this perfectly on there, because you still have your heat and bond glue stuff on the inside. So you want to apply some heat to that. So we're going to just press, 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 press. No steam, no steam, no steam. Press, 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 press. Okay, and now we have the fabric pressed onto the edge here. Do, 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 do. And again, one more time, you would do your applique stitch, and then they would meet up beautifully right here. And then now, if for any reason one side is taller than the other, you can peel this back a little bit and, like, you know, cut it down, but you really don't want to do that if you don't have to. Also, I don't do my actual applique stitch between the seams until after the seam is made, and then I go over this with an applique stitch. But so, do 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 do. You would then again applique stitch right along the edge here, and then there is your finished rounded part of your tunic. So then once you have your finished rounded part, and once you have your finished bottom part of your tunic, and they're all applique stitched down, then you can stitch them together, the sides, using the French seam technique that we used earlier. See, beautiful French seam technique here. And you then have this beautiful finished bottom on both the rounded part of your tunic and the bottom part of your tunic, creating one beautiful, consistent, and long end of your tunic with a beautiful finished edge that is nice and secure. And it's a great way to finish the bottoms of your tunic. Again, it's a great way to finish the sleeves of your tunic as well. So again, just like on the top, just on the bottom, same as on the sleeves, you have this beautiful finished edge, and then you have this appliqued edge, and that entraps the raw edge that you see here of the bottom area. So that applique stitch then locks that in, and then you have a finished edge. So there you have it. I'm going to go ahead and take my phone off of this because everything feels very warm here. And then let's flip this back over. All right. Oh, God. Oh, no. All right. So there you have it. We went ahead and we covered... no, messy hair. Okay, so there you have it. We have covered today how to make a beautiful finished edge on the bottom of your little tiny doll tunic pieces. So you have your finished on the bottom and your finished on the top. Again, using fun little contrasting applique stitches, you can add a level of interest to any seam. And then of course we also went over how to do a couple seams, and oh my god, I have no idea where those example fabrics are these it? Yeah. And so we went over how to do a French seam, which is the outside of your tunic. This is the inside of your tunic, and you see that there is no raw edge because we have encased it in the secondary stitch that then faces out to the rest of the world, giving you a beautiful finished tunic. Or covering the factor that you can also do a seam like this and have it either rolled over. One other seam that I talked about that a lot of people do if they're making suits or something super fancy is you can take a bias tape. Let me see if I have an example of bias tape because that's important. Bias tape, bias tape, bias, bias, bias tape. Yeah, all right, bias tape. Okay, so you can take bias tape, and you want it to not be this one because this one is a little too big for seams. You want it to be the single fold so that you can fold it around your edge, but I only have double folds. So you take your bias tape, okay, and then if it was a single fold, it would look like this, where it has just, your edge is on the inside and it's flat, you would then fold it over and iron it, or not. You can just attach it to the edge. And then you would take your seam here. So this is my seam, this is my raw seam. You would line the bias tape up to the seam. Again, I honestly only really see this if you're making something super fancy like suits or something like that. And you line the bias tape just above that seam stitch line, and then you would stitch across. That way it is encasing your raw edge, and it gives you this nice finished look and protects your raw edge from falling apart. So that's it, folks. That's all I got for today. So feel free, if you're tuning in at the very end here, I'm going to go ahead and post this video, and then you can follow along with me. It's about an hour long. I'm not going to lie. We're an hour and a half. Wow, it was an hour and a half of doing finished edges on doll size tunic parts and finished seams. So I hope you guys enjoyed that today. If you want me to cover something specific, send me a message. I'm going to be stuck at home for a while. Or you know, comment below, and maybe tomorrow I will be covering how to make a neckline. Yay, necklines! Woo, exciting! But I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your night. Remember to wash your hands. Stay inside unless you have to leave or you're an essential worker. And, you know, don't go around coughing on people. That sounds terrible. Why would you do that? That's awful. Ugh. All right. Wash your hands. Wash your hands. Wash hands. Have a good night.